I shouldn't be making this video, but sometimes things happen in the video game industry that just blow my mind. See, in all my years of gaming, I've seen some of the wildest things happen. Sure, there's been plenty of releases that, when announced, blew me away. But there's something extra special about games that return from the dead. You know, titles that were once rumored, previewed, promoted, and then they vanished from existence. Metroid Dread and Star Fox 2 were probably the most surprising games that were covered extensively by media outlets, only to never end up being finished, as if they were a fish who lost its fins, sinking into the sea, left to rot at the bottom of a pile of dust. Awkward metaphors aside, it's moments like these when vaporware becomes real. And it's awesome. But what am I going on and on about? Well, you've seen the title card, so folks, it's time to talk about Shantae Advance Risky Revolution, released for the Game Boy Advance as of April 2025, with an eventual port to modern consoles to come soon. This game, for all intensive purposes, should not exist, and yet it's regrown its fins, swimming in a sea full of Wayforward Games' other developed classics. See, I brought it full circle. Not such an awkward metaphor now, is it? I'll admit though, it feels a little surreal to be talking about this, let alone playing it. But you're probably wondering, what the hell is Shantae Advance? Back in the early 2000s, a game developed by then unknown studio Wayforward Games was released by Capcom in 2002 as a swan song to the Game Boy Color. However, knowing that the game would release for a dying handheld, Wayforward made the decision to add some extra content into the cart in case players upgraded from the Game Boy Color to the backwards compatible Game Boy Advance. It would be an incentive to grab the game despite the fact that players were upgrading their equipment and probably wanted to get Game Boy Advance games, not necessarily Game Boy Color ones. It's that whole Toy Story Andy, "I don't want to play with you anymore" meme, but in real life. During the game's release, the developers wanted this intellectual property to be their flagship title. Shantae was poised to be the next Mario, Mega Man, and Simon Belmont, all rolled into one half-genie hero. But alas, sales suffered despite glowing reviews for the game. Because of this, no publishers wanted to touch Shantae's potential sequel due to poor sales, so Shantae Advance's fins were clipped in 2004. Sneaking that metaphor back in. Anyways, although the words cult classic get tossed around quite a bit for the original Shantae, it only became this way thanks to eventual sequels which came to fruition courtesy of the first published Shantae sequel, Shantae Risky's Revenge, via the Nintendo DSi's DSiWare service. Considering it was one of, if not the best game on DSiWare, gamers were starving for something to play on the downloadable service, and Shantae answered that call. After a mega hit courtesy of that game's sequel, Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, as well as a Kickstarter-funded game called Shantae Half-Genie Hero, the series was now regularly being pursued for development of newer titles in the franchise. However, fans noticed some gaps in the story between the first Shantae game and Risky's Revenge. Fast forward to 2023, when a frequent publishing collaborator, Limited Run Games, partnered with Wayforward to announce Shantae Advance was going to be finished, with it now given the subname Risky Revolution. And to top it all off, it was coming to the Game Boy Advance after all these years. Love them or hate them, you can't deny that this is a truly astounding thing to happen. And in 2025, it became a reality. So was it worth the wait? Hell yes it was. I don't know about you, but I'm ret to go. Here's everything you need to know about Shantae Advance Risky Revolution. To understand Risky Revolution, we'll need to first cover the basics of who Shantae is. Co-created by husband and wife team Matt and Aaron Bozon, Wayforward's purple-haired darling is a half-genie hero and protector of a town called Sequinland. The mayor, who is an incompetent idiot and apparently also a robot, has hired Shantae as the guardian of Sequinland. Shantae has a colorful cast of allies at her side, such as her father figure / uncle known as Mimic, a genius inventor whose creations generally fuel pursuit from antagonists. In addition to Uncle Mimic, we have Sky, a beautiful blonde girl who helps Shantae travel on the wings of her bird buddy Ratchet, Bolo, the goofy male assistant fighter and friend of Shantae's, and Roddy Tops, a zombie girl who doesn't get along with Sky. She's also the one who runs the local shop, which we'll get into more in a bit. This time around, main antagonist and all-around busty pirate wench Risky Boots has found a way to loot and plunder the lands with ease by switching the tectonic plates around. This causes backgrounds to not match up with locations visited, making docking entries and travel a breeze. Shantae's goal is to stop Risky Boots from causing the plates to shift and to get all locations back to their original places. To do this, Shantae has to rescue 3 different scientist pals of Uncle Mimics by going into dungeons. If you've played any Shantae games, particularly Half Genie Hero and Risky's Revenge, this game sits somewhere in the middle in terms of style. It is chapter-based, which means it has a specific linear narrative and layout. So for those people who prefer the original Shantae for its more non-linear style, I'd say you might be disappointed. But honestly, this game felt closer to what a Shantae game was previously as compared to, say, the more recently released Shantae and the Seven Sirens. Canon-wise, this game takes place between the first Shantae and the DSi game, Risky's Revenge. Gameplay and controls are tight as always. Shantae uses her beautiful purple ponytail to whip her foes Castlevania style. Enemies drop hearts to heal her, magic bar refills, or gems which can be used to purchase items in the item shop. Roddy Tops is running the store, and she appears in Sequin Land or in certain dungeons where she can upgrade the speed of Shantae's hair whip, sell her sub-weapons like the Pike Ball, Lightning Cloud, and Fireball, all of which are upgradable as well. There's also some other abilities like the Float Cake, which lets you walk off of cliffs to reach faraway platforms, an Exit Candy, which lets Shantae leave a dungeon if need be without returning to the entrance manually, the Greedy Jar, which allows gems to be gathered quicker, Vanish Cream, which makes you temporarily invisible and invulnerable, or my favorite, the Twin Mints. This ability allows Shantae to duplicate herself in a shadow style like in Ninja Gaiden 2: The Dark Sword of Chaos, allowing attacks to hit twice instead of once. Save spots are plentiful throughout the game, almost to an annoying amount. Every time you exit a level via your bird buddy Ratchet, you're asked to save, so if you go to the wrong location, you may have to decline a save more than you'd like. Locations are broken down on the map once you begin riding Ratchet, and there's honestly a very easy pattern to follow. Generally, you'll be given 2 small locations, which are small spaces of land where Shantae must talk to the location's inhabitants. Their backgrounds have been swapped courtesy of Risky Boots, and it's up to Shantae to find the dungeon in the 3rd, larger location to swap the other 2 back to where they belong. This leads to some hilarious dialogue and banter in those smaller stages. I have to say, I always found Shantae's games to be endearingly funny, but they really turned up the dial on this game. I spent a good amount of time laughing out loud at some of the characters. I loved how many locations have video game enthusiasts like the Shovel Werewolf. Find some garbage game for him and trade it for an item, Simon's Quest style. Or perhaps Share Werewolf is more your style. Games for everyone. How about the lovely island cult girls who turn into skeletons after the level changes back, prompting them to dunk their bodies willingly into a volcano? Or my favorite, the Hot Bug Moms, led by, and I quote, Slush Fund. What an amazing comedic game. I seriously laughed throughout this entire adventure, and if you don't, well, at least stay for the Hot Bug Moms. Jeez, I really do have a weird fetish for insect women. Anyways, speaking of fetishes, there's tons of fan service in this game with suggestive themes of the jiggling variety. Shantae has always been a series that walks the plank between E for everyone and teen rating material, mostly for the lovely ladies and their digital giblets. Yes, be warned, you'll see chesticles and booties jiggling quite often. And while that may not be a bad thing depending on your opinion, it hasn't changed throughout the series, being a mainstay since the first entry, so you should kinda know what you're in for. Graphically, this game is insanely gorgeous. The sprites are well animated and detailed, with the beautiful colors highlighting some of the best graphics on the Game Boy Advance for a 2D sprite-based game. If you told me this game was made for the 3DS, I'd believe you. But lo and behold, it's utilizing the Game Boy Advance, pushing the handheld to its limits in many ways. Even if this game did get released in the mid-2000s, I doubt it would look this good. The developers took their time to really stretch their development muscles, creating gorgeous landscapes. Plus, Shantae, her cast of characters, the villains and enemies all look phenomenal. Enemy design is pretty much on par with most stuff seen in other Shantae games, from tiny crabs to skeletons, Lamia, archer bird girls, and Venom? The game's got a typical set of baddies that steal from other games in the franchise, and that's A-okay. Level design can be a bit confusing at times, but once you get the hang of it, the maze-like structure of each chapter's third stage is a labyrinth of foreground and background travel. Shantae will try to access the dungeon entrance in these stages by either puzzles or complicated level structures. There were several "where do I go" moments that eventually became "oh, duh, it was in front of me the whole time" moments, so I can't blame the game for my stupidity. She'll have access to the background via a portal, which will allow her to access behind certain areas, which will be needed in order to access the dungeons. Each dungeon is well designed and complicated, but in a very fair way. If you've played any classic Legend of Zelda dungeons, think that, but side-scrolling like a Castlevania, Metroid, or Mega Man game. Keys can be found to access certain portions of the dungeons, and there are these fountains which Shantae will come across that can give her transformation powers. If you've never played a Shantae game before, let me clue you in. Shantae is a half genie, which means she has the power to transform into certain animals or mythical creatures like an elephant, a monkey, spider, crab, mermaid, and harpy. Hidden in each third stage outside of the dungeon, Shantae can also find upgrades for these transformations. By pressing and holding the R button, it triggers Shantae to begin her genie dance, and pressing a second button transforms her based on whichever button is pressed. The upgrades to these new forms allow new abilities such as the elephant ground pound or the mermaid wiggling and jiggling through seaweed masses. I will say I was impressed with how fast the transformations could be triggered and untriggered. I'd argue it's even faster than some of the later games in the franchise. And what's cool is, on the top left-hand side of the screen, if you transform, then transform back, you can use the L button to re-trigger the transformation, so that way you don't have to do the genie dance again. Music was a big concern for me regarding Shantae Advance. Jake Kaufman was the lead composer on every Shantae game up until the Kickstarter-backed Shantae Half Genie Hero release. But after that game, Kaufman left. The follow-up, Shantae and the Seven Sirens, left a lot to be desired musically. The soundtrack wasn't terrible or anything, but it just didn't feel at home with the Middle Eastern flavored dance, funk, and electronic tracks which Kaufman built a name upon. One of the biggest issues is that Seven Sirens had 4 different composers on it, shaking up the musical flow between games with too many cooks in the kitchen. However, the sole composer of Risky Revolution is Seven Sirens alumni Maddie Lim, and she does an excellent job of not only returning to the classic sound of the series, but doing justice to it. There's just so many excellent tracks to highlight, but this was probably my favorite so far. Give it a listen. Shantae Advance Risky Revolution shouldn't exist, but I'm so glad it does. After Seven Sirens, I was truly worried that one of my favorite franchises wouldn't be able to recapture the magic of the first few releases, but this game absolutely delivers. I had a blast from start to finish, so for those who didn't grab the physical Game Boy Advance cart from Limited Run, be sure to pick this up when it debuts for more modern consoles sometime this year. It's just such an amazing feeling to play a game that was once considered dead in the water. But thankfully, there's sunny skies ahead for Shantae and her pals.
Alright, okay, I'm here for the review. Wait, what? The review is over. But what about the skit? You totally forgot about the skit. Didn't you get the memo? Skits in video game reviews are so cringe. It's like wanting to go to Blockbuster Video. Hey, I like Blockbuster Video. No, you didn't. Nobody likes going to Blockbuster Video. You end up going there with your best friend, looking all over the place for movies, and you can't decide on anything because half the stuff is sold out and the other half you don't want to see. So you end up in a Wendy's parking lot where you meet up with a bunch of local rap artists, and you and your friends agree to buy their $5 CD as long as you can, I don't know, take a photo with them. Screw Blockbuster Video. That sounds oddly specific. It is. Now get out of here with that wig. We already did a skit in a Shantae review where you're wearing a purple wig. Get out of here. Okay.
Thanks to all Patreon members, but especially the Morningstar Whip tier and up. They are Venthros, Great White North Presents, Sam Schaefer, Scott McElhone, and Trevin Adams. Your support really helps with each and every review. If anyone is watching this and wants to help, feel free to join in the link below. For those who want to help in other ways, sharing the review on your social media really means a lot, as my channel has and always will be sponsored by viewers like you. Thanks for watching. Want more Dude You Haven't Played This Game? Check out the videos on the screen. Or head to my channel and grab the full playlist of reviews and retrospectives. I'll see you on the next Dude You Haven't Played This Game.